Tonight, Federal High Court in Abuja adjourns indefinitely the trial of the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, as a defendant refuses to appear in court. Court of Appeal in Abuja disqualifies Senator Godswill Akpabio as the All Progressives Congress senatorial candidate for Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District in the 2023 election. Federal High Court in Oyo disqualifies Akan Dofia as Akwa Ibom State APC governorship candidate for the 2023 election, orders free election, or rather fresh election, within 14 days, bars Dofia from participating in the exercise. The potential of tourism sector in driving national development comes into focus as the United Nations World Tourism Organization Global Conference kicks off in Lagos.
On business news tonight, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries cuts 2022 global oil demand growth forecast for a fifth time since April.
On sports news tonight, with 6 days to the kick-off of the World Cup, African champions Teranga Lions of Senegal become the first African team to arrive in Qatar ahead of their opening Group H game against the Netherlands.
From Abuja, House of Representatives mandates committee to make provision of 200 billion naira for flood mitigation, recovery and relief packages in the 2023 budget.
And in international news from London, the Ukrainian president has visited the city of Kherson days after it was liberated by Ukrainian troops.
The 7-year legal battle between the federal government and the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, took yet another turn today as a federal high court in Abuja adjourned indefinitely his trial on terrorism charges brought against him by the federal government. The trial judge, Justice Binta Yako, adjourned sine die to await the decision of the Supreme Court on appeals by the federal government and Mr. Nnamdi Kanu's defense team. 2 other applications billed for hearing before the court were also put on hold indefinitely for the same reason. Meanwhile, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu today refused to appear before the Federal High Court.
The sight of security agencies at the Federal High Court, Abuja, is indicative of the expected presence of the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, in court as he faces charges bordering on alleged treasonable felony. However, the story is different inside the courtroom. Mr. Kanu is conspicuously absent, and his lawyers informed the trial judge that the accused has refused to appear before the court. Counsel for the federal government, Mr. Mohammed Abubakar, informs the court that all entreaties made to persuade him to have a change of heart were rebuffed. Today's hearing was also for a feedback on the outcome of Mr. Kanu's appeal at the appellate court. 2 other applications scheduled for hearing were also put on hold.
Why will Nnamdi Kanu, who has already indicated in a cross appeal against that case that he wants to be at the Supreme Court for the hearing of his matter, why will he suddenly turn around and say he's not coming to court? To me, that story stands logic on its head, and I don't buy into it at all.
Mr. Ozekome also notes that his client has not been served a copy of the fresh charge filed against him by the federal government.
Another charge sprang up today. We actually read it in the social media over the weekend that Nnamdi Kanu is being arraigned today again on the same old charge, which the Court of Appeal has said this court, including any other court in Nigeria, is prohibited from ever trying him on the same count charge. We were not served the charge sheet. We only read it in the social media. And when I asked the prosecution today to give me a copy, they said they also don't have a copy here. They didn't have a copy here. So I told the court that what I would have expected would be that the prosecution should just have gotten up to withdraw that matter because it constitutes an abuse of court process.
On one hand, the federal government is challenging the appellate court's judgment that quashed the 15-count terrorism charge it entered against Mr. Kanu, while on the other hand, the IPOB leader has approached the Supreme Court to query the legality of the Court of Appeal's decision to stay execution of the order for his release.
And in a major upset, the Court of Appeal Abuja has disqualified former Minister for Niger Delta Affairs, Senator Godswill Akpabio, from contesting as APC's senatorial candidate for Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District in the coming election. Setting aside a previous judgment of the Federal High Court Abuja, a three-member panel of justices led by Justice Denlami Senchi today held that Senator Akpabio failed to file a proof of argument within the time provided by the rules. The panel further ruled that Senator Akpabio, being a presidential aspirant of the APC, could not participate in the valid primary of the party held on May the 27th and monitored by the Independent National Electoral Commission INEC, which produced Udom Ekpodum as a candidate. The Federal High Court in Abuja had on September the 22nd asked INEC to reinstate Senator Akpabio as APC's candidate. And in yet another case of disqualification in Akwa Ibom State, the Federal High Court sitting in Uyo, the state capital, has disqualified Mr. Akan Odofia as the APC governorship candidate in the 2023 governorship election. The court ruled that Mr. Odofia has never been a member of All Progressives Congress. In her judgment, Justice Agatha Okeke ordered that a fresh election be conducted within 14 days and barred Mr. Odofia from participating in the election. The former Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Niger Delta Affairs, Senator Ita Enang, who filed the case challenging the candidacy of Mr. Odofia, had alleged that the defendant was not an APC member as at the time the poll was conducted, noting that Mr. Odofia contested in the PDP governorship primary election held on May the 25th before coming to contest the APC primary on May the 26th. Well, there's yet a time for everything, you may say, and for the presidential candidates of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Chief Bola Tinubu, and his PDP counterpart, Atiku Abubakar, election is not a do-or-die affair. But both men were seen displaying some form of camaraderie when they met at the private wing of the Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport, Abuja. Well, on this day, exactly 4 weeks ago, both candidates had met in a similar convivial manner and atmosphere at the same airport. Meanwhile, Chief Tinubu has since arrived in Jos, the Plateau State capital, for the kickoff of the APC's presidential campaign. Well, it will appear some political party supporters didn't get that conviviality memo with reports of physical assault and repression against rival parties in Rivers State, where the political atmosphere appears tensed. The latest of such reports is the disruption of a political engagement of the governorship candidate of the Social Democratic Party, Senator Magnus Abe, in Oyibo Rivers local government area. Addressing journalists in Port Harcourt, Senator Abe said his supporters in the area informed him that a group of boys had invaded and disrupted the preparation at the community hall in Ayama area of Oyibo, which was the venue of a meeting with his supporters.
The meeting was to hold in a hall in Ayama. This hall was built by me, funded by me, and donated to the community when I was in the Senate as one of my constituency projects. When it was they heard on the radio that we were to hold a meeting there, early this morning, thugs led by the personal assistant to the state PDP chairman, Ambassador Desmond Akawu, broke into the place, scattered everything, and locked up the place and said we could not hold a meeting there, even though prior approval for the facility had been given by the chiefs and elders of the community and all that. When that information was given to me, I duly informed the police and I asked them to withdraw because our principle have been non-confrontation, no violence. And the meeting was taken to the private compound of one of our supporters. And I left here to go and attend the meeting, having moved it out of the hall, which was my own constituency project. When we got to Egberu, the border into Oyibo, the road was blocked by thugs armed with all kinds of dangerous weapons, guns, machetes, knives, that this is the home of Desmond Akawu and that we could not enter Oyibo. There can be no SDP in Oyibo local government.
Also, matters concerning election management. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has been responding to varying issues ranging from the discrepancies noticed on the recently released voter register, attacks on its facilities, and other threats to the 2023 general elections. INEC National Commissioner Mr. Festus Okoye explains that the current voter register is a preliminary compilation of registrants from 2011 general elections till date. He added that INEC deliberately put out the register in line with its plans to enroll public participation in cleaning up the voter register. And on the burnt permanent voter cards, the INEC commissioner says the identification numbers of the PVCs have been harvested for reprinting. He was a guest on our program, Politics Today.
A total of 12,298,944 persons completed their registration. Out of this particular number, the Commission declared as invalid a total of 2,780,756, leaving a total of 9,518,188. So what the Commission has done is to integrate this number with the existing number on the voters register, which stood at around 84 million, giving us a total of 93,522,272. So that's what we have put out there as a preliminary register that people should check. Now, we want people to look at the register and assist the Commission. One, check whether their names have been properly spelled, whether their personal particulars have been properly captured, whether some pictures are upside down so that we can correct them, whether there are still names of deceased persons on the register, whether there are obviously underage persons on the register. And we have done this both physically. We have displayed this register in the 774 local government areas of Nigeria and in the 8,809 registration areas across the Federation. Not only that, we have also put this thing up on our website, and we have made it in such a way that any person, the word is any person, can go on our website and raise an objection relating to the presence of any individual on the register. And then the moment the person raises an objection or makes a claim, the person will be given a slip and given an indication of where these claims and objections will be had, because that is what Section 19 of the Electoral Act provides.
Away from elections to the National Assembly, where as part of its response to the flooding across the country, the House of Representatives has mandated its Committee on Appropriation to make provision for 200 billion naira in the 2023 appropriation year for the Ecological Project Office in the Presidency. The lawmakers made this resolution after considering an urgent motion on the flood disaster. The Green Chamber asked the federal government to make an urgent request for a supplementary budget from the National Assembly as an intervention fund for mitigation, recovery and relief programs across the nation. Well, in part two, after the break, military releases names of 19 persons wanted for terrorism, offers a reward of 5 million naira for information leading to the arrest of any of them. Oh, that's in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Federal High Court in Abuja adjourns indefinitely the trial of the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, as the defendant refuses to appear in court. Court of Appeal in Abuja disqualifies Senator Godswill Akpabio as APC senatorial candidate for Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District in the 2023 elections. Federal High Court in Uyo sacks Akan Adofia as Akwa Ibom State APC governorship candidate for the election, orders fresh election within 14 days and bars Adofia from participating in the exercise. And potential of tourism sector in driving national development comes into focus as the United Nations World Tourism Organization Global Conference kicks off in Lagos. elections ahead of the 2023 polls. Presidential candidate of the New Nigeria People's Party, Rabiu Kwankwaso, says he's not ruling out the possibility of negotiating with terrorists as a way of tackling security challenges if he's elected president. The NNPP candidate gave this position during the People's Town Hall organized by Channels Television and its partners in Abuja. Our correspondent Dari Dowu reports.
Outer Development Commission, former presidential aspirant under the APC in 2015.
It's the first of many series of the People's Town Hall ahead of the general elections next year. The presidential candidate of the New Nigeria People's Party, Rabiu Kwankwaso, and his running mate, Isaac Idausa, are the first to take the center stage.
Thank you so much indeed. Please have your seat, gentlemen. Also on Zoom, who have joined us.
The questions posed to the candidates range from security to economy, education, and politics. And the first set of questions on security rolling from the audience in the auditorium.
There is a lack of accountability within the security sector, where officials whose negligence or other acts of omission or commission are not penalized. You were once a Minister of Defense. What did you do as Minister of Defense to address this challenge? And what would you do if you are elected the president?
The military in this country are very much inadequate. Now we want to raise the level of just less than 250,000 to about 1 million. So also the police, less than 230,000 to another 1 million. And people in your own area, the DSS, of course, will increase the number, and civil defense and so on, to match the exigencies of this moment. Of course, issue of training, retraining, issue not only of the intelligence from the people, even the artificial intelligence that is very strong now due to the level of the technology that we have across the world. And of course, we will have everybody working together to ensure peace and stability. So on one hand, yes, we will dialogue with anybody. But throughout the history of not only Nigeria, the world over, there will always be few people who will not be happy with peace. And that's where government will take necessary action to ensure that there is peace in each and every square meter in this country.
Meanwhile, the vice presidential candidate Isaac Idausa believes there's a strong correlation between corruption and economic management.
We should look out for the output of goods and services, curb capital flight, whereby it's a process where Nigerians siphon our hard-earned money abroad and they engage in deploying the services of our monies abroad. Now, leadership must be found to be absolutely transparent. There must be transparency, probity, and accountability. We'll be cutting costs of governance. We'll make sure governance is not lucrative. Right now, people do all they want to do to be in governance because of it's so lucrative to be in government.
The town hall organized by Channels Television is supported by UK Aid, Hope Action for Progressive Women and Youth in Politics, the Situation Room, Yaga Africa, and the Partnership to Engage, Reform and Learn. Dari Dowu, Channels Television News.
Well, to the tourism sector, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO Global Conference has begun in Lagos with a focus on linking culture and creative industries with tourism. Well, the World Tourism Organization is a United Nations agency responsible for the promotion of responsible, sustainable, and universally accessible tourism. Our correspondent, Olumide Macaulay, reports.
A common denominator must be found between tourism, culture, and creative industries. As the UNWTO conference gets underway, it's hoped that it becomes a means to an end for recovery and inclusive development.
Subject like you were studying math,
and it's for that reason this hall at the National Theatre is filled with officials of the UNWTO, foreign ministers, representatives of international organizations, including the Secretary General of the UNWTO, who introduces tourism as a viable investment opportunity.
The future of Africa is in tourism, and the future of Africa is in youth, so that's why we tried to have with us representatives of different schools from Lagos, and many thanks, dear colleagues, our future colleagues, to be with us.
The Minister of Information, Culture and Tourism also lists other benefits of tourism.
Within these premises, tourism, culture, and the creative industries therefore present a huge potential to bridge this gap, especially at a time of great economic challenges the world over.
Elsia Grand Court champions the cause on a global stage.
UNWTO, as one of its core priorities, education, youth is at the center of it, and also with the UNWTO Agenda for Africa, Tourism for Inclusive Growth, we place youth empowerment through tourism as one of the main priorities to be fulfilled, with a view to create employment opportunities, generate added value, and spur socio-economic development for the whole continent.
And I have one question for you.
After a poetry recital, the conference dovetails to a session of question and answer with students of a private school.
One of the main reasons why people come to Nigeria is also because of our music, our culture, and our film. So a country without this kind of infrastructure would not be able to promote its tourism.
Attendees include a scholar from Spain who appreciates the impact of intercontinental hospitality.
Spain is one of the most diverse and one of the richest countries in the world in terms of heritage, in terms of nature, in terms of history, in terms of culture.
SME workshops and stalls add another dimension to the first day of the three-day event. Prior to the pandemic, 7% of global trade was attributed to tourism. As the path of recovery is embraced and African countries are waking up to smell the coffee, it's more realized now that tourism, culture, and creative industries are important for national growth. Reporting from the National Theatre, Igamu, Lagos, Southwest Nigeria, Olumide Macaulay, Channels Television News.
Well, indeed, the conference continues tomorrow with the opening ceremony. Well, Gloria Mizoke is here from our Abuja studio with more stories on the news at 10. Hello, Gloria.
Hello, Coyote. Here in Abuja, enhancing private sector participation, the need for political will on the part of the government, and tackling insecurity, youth unemployment, and gender inequality were the issues on the front burner at the 28th Nigerian Economic Summit, which began in Abuja today. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who declared the event open, said the federal government under President Muhammadu Buhari has prioritized developing the non-oil sector as he calls for improved productivity and value addition across different sectors of the economy. Our correspondent, Emperor Simon, reports.
The arrival of the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, signals the commencement of the 28th Nigerian Economic Summit holding in Abuja. Government officials, including state governors and ministers, private sector players, technocrats and foreign investors are attending the event, which, according to the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit, Mr. Asue Ihodalo, aims to provide a proper understanding of the issues at stake and aggregate views on how to tackle them appropriately. Just as the keynote speaker, Mr. Pascal Doze, says the government must deal with national security.
To sustain our turnaround, our new government from 29th May 2023 must be ready for office and show an understanding of the critical issues. Accordingly, we must at this summit reach a broad-based consensus on certain policies and issues that our leading contenders must subscribe to.
As a fundamental principle of nationhood, regardless of the cost, we must deal with threats to our national security, violence, attacks, terrorism, war, espionage, in a smart, transparent, accountable, and coordinated manner.
As Nigeria grapples with the challenge of unemployment, high inflation rate, among others, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, calls for increased productivity to create more jobs for Nigerian youths.
We must create the environment for business to make local and international trade easier by fixing our ports, effecting the national single window, revamping our customs processes and tariff codes to reduce delays and arbitrariness, removing needless restrictions on imports to enable value-added processes, etc. Of course, our exchange rate regime remains an issue of some concern. The discussions that we must have, shorn of sentiments, is how best to manage the situation by finding a mechanism for increasing supply and moderating demand, a mechanism which will be transparent and which will boost confidence.
Professor Osinbajo also congratulates Mr. Ni Yusuf on his election as the new chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group.
With the theme 2023 and beyond, priorities for shared prosperity, there's a consensus at this summit that those preparing to take over the leadership of the country come 2023 must rise up to the occasion of ensuring that the country develops at a pace that will translate to better welfare for the citizenry. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Well, still ahead on the news at 10, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries cuts 2022 global oil demand growth forecast for a fifth time since April. But that's in business news. Join us again. Welcome back. You're still watching the news at 10, coming to you live on Channels Television. To security, the Nigerian military has released names of 19 men wanted for terrorism and is offering a reward of 5 million naira for any person who volunteers information leading to the arrest of any of the wanted persons. Well, some of the names on the list released by the Director of Defense Information, Major General Jimmy Apo, include Sani Dangote from Zamfara, Bello Toji Guda, also from Zamfara, Leko Katsina, Dogo, Nahali, Katsina, and Nagona from Sokoto. Others are Nasanda from Zamfara, Isiya Koshen Garwa from Katsina, Ali Kachala, also known as Ali Kawaji, Zamfara, and Abu Rade Katsina, as well as Danda from Katsina. You can get the full list of the names released by the military on our website, www.channelstv.com. Now to health matters. The Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike has received a major boost in health care delivery with the commissioning of Dr. Peter Odili Cancer and Cardiovascular Diagnostic and Treatment Center in Port Harcourt, the state capital. The medical facility is said to be the first by any state government, and one of the 3 functional in the country, is among landmark projects by his administration in the health sector. At the commissioning, which was performed by the Emir of Kano, Alhaji Aminu Ado Bayero, Governor Wike says with a commitment, nothing is impossible to achieve in the country.
After 14 months of intensive works, the government-sponsored Cancer and Cardiovascular Diagnostic and Treatment Center in Port Harcourt, River State, is set to be inaugurated by the Emir of Kano, Alhaji Aminu Ado Bayero.
Allah will continue to bless you.
And that's the reason for this gathering, led by the host governor, Nyesom Wike, accompanied by his wife. The 3-story facility, which is named after former governor of the state, Dr. Peter Odili, is fitted with ICU and CCU patient accommodation ward, critical care areas for immune-compromised patients and private isolation bed wards, as well as a helipad for emergency patient drop-off, among others.
What we have here cannot be found in any part of this country, Nigeria, as I speak to you. The latest of the equipment, the most important equipment in the attack of 2 deadly problems of mankind, cancers and cardiovascular problems, will now be handled here.
And elated Dr. Odili and the special guest, the Emir of Kano, appreciate Governor Wike's commitment in project delivery in critical areas.
Revive the old friendship. Stand with him. If you stand with Governor Wike, you can work without your aids, you can walk with your eyes closed. He's a man you can depend on.
It is not also out of place to appeal to the federal government of Nigeria to borrow a leaf from the governor of Rivers State and establish similar centers in each of the geopolitical zones so as to alleviate the suffering of those with cancer and cardiovascular related issues.
For Governor Wike, this is a mark of good governance and commitment to service, which he says is important in leadership.
When I was a minister, I did a lot of primary and secondary schools here. When I was a minister, I gave financial grants to Kenule Polytechnic and Ignatius Ajuri University. So, you cannot hold me. I didn't make any promise I did not fulfill.
The 25.9 billion naira Dr. Peter Odili Health Facility in Rivers State is said to be a major step by the Wike administration to fight cancer, which results in about 72,000 deaths annually, according to the Nigeria National Cancer Prevention and Control Plan 2018 to 2022.
Well, that's it from the nation's capital. We go over now to Anne Nwawado for business news.
Hello and welcome to Business News. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, has cut its 2022 global oil growth demand forecast for the 5th time since April this year. The oil bloc has further trimmed next year's figure, citing mounting economic challenges, including high inflation and rising interest rates. According to OPEC, in its latest report, oil demand in the year 2022 will rise by 2.55 million barrels per day, and by 2.24 million barrels per day in 2023. This is 100,000 barrels per day lower from the previous forecast. This report is the latest before OPEC Plus meets in December. Meanwhile, oil prices maintained a decline after the report was released, trading around $95 a barrel. And outside our shores, the annual meeting of leaders from the world's major economies, known as the Group of 20 Nations, is set to take off on Tuesday, November the 15th, on the holiday island of Bali in Indonesia. This is coming as the global economy grapples with a looming recession, central banks' high interest rate hikes, and historically skyrocketing inflation. The annual meeting of world leaders is also taking place as Russia's war in Ukraine drags on and relations between Washington and Beijing remain intense. The gathering of officials, which represents more than 80% of global GDP and 75% of exports worldwide, marks the 17th meeting since the platform kicked off after the Asian financial crisis in 1999. And back home, the equities market has kicked off the third trading week in November on a negative note. Investors are still looking at profits in MTN Nigeria. Laddie Williams has the details.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Well, let's get a sense of how your money performed today. And yeah, it's bearish. The third week of November kicks off in the red. Let's look at the all-share index there. It's down 0.34%, 43,818 points. Market cap, 23.866 trillion naira. Let's look at the activity chart today. Volume, just volume in the red, 187 million units of stocks traded, valued at 2.53 billion naira. See deals also in the green there, 3,326 deals showing sell pressure with the profit taking we saw on the market today. Let's look at the sectoral performance now. That's it, banking counter in the green, up 0.26%, thanks to 3 out of the fugas there, the tier 1 bankers propping up that counter. Oil and gas down 0.38%, thanks to Owando there. And consumer goods unchanged today. Well, we saw about 75 billion naira there, chopped off the market capitalization today from the impact of profit taking. Well, that's the stock market report. I'm Laddie Williams. It's back to you.
And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawado. The rest of the news at 10 continues now with Coyote.
And coming up next, U.S. President Joe Biden rules out a new Cold War with China after his first in-person meeting with a Chinese leader since Biden became president. Stay with us. U.S. President Joe Biden says there will be no new Cold War with China following his first in-person meeting between the two leaders since Biden became president. Well, Simon Pusey has more in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The Ukrainian president has visited the city of Kherson days after it was liberated by Ukrainian troops. Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to soldiers, saying Ukraine is moving forward and ready for peace. It comes after a weekend of celebrations in the regional capital, after Ukrainian troops re-entered the city after months of Russian occupation. The loss of Kherson, taken in the early stages of the invasion, is a major setback for Russia, though Moscow insists it is still Russian territory.
It's a pity, but it's a long way, difficult way, because this war took the best heroes of our country, and so but for us it's very understandable. We don't believe Russia, yes, and they're tricking with all the world. That's why we are going forward. We're ready for peace, but our peace for our country.
The US president has spoken of the importance of avoiding conflict with China during a meeting with the Chinese president. The two met in front of the cameras before the high-profile meeting of the G20 countries in Bali.
You're kind enough to call me to congratulate me, and I congratulate you as well.
It is Mr. Xi's highest-profile trip out of China in recent years. The talks come at a time when relations between the two superpowers have soured. Among other topics, he and Joe Biden are expected to discuss Taiwan, Ukraine, and North Korea's nuclear ambitions.
As the leaders of our two nations, we share responsibility, in my view, to show that China and the United States can manage our differences, prevent competition from becoming anything ever near conflict, and to find ways to work together on urgent global issues that require our mutual cooperation.
People in Turkey's capital have returned to the main street where a bomb blast killed at least 6 and wounded 81 people over the weekend. 2 tables have been placed on either side of Istiklal Street, covered with red carnations. Here, CCTV footage showing the moment a flash of light and smoke filled the busy street. And here, crowds fleeing the scene of the explosion. Istanbul police named the suspected bomber as Alham al-Bashir, a Syrian national who was detained in an overnight raid. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the perpetrators would be punished. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa will step aside if charged over an alleged cover-up of a robbery at his private farm. His spokesman said should the president be charged, he would gladly step aside should it be the case. Dubbed Farmgate, the controversy surrounds the robbery at Falafala Farm back in February 2020 and the alleged aftermath. The president is accused of kidnapping, bribery and acting unlawfully by allegedly authorizing the pursuit of the suspects, who stole an estimated $4 million. The UK will pay France £8 million more a year under a revised deal to try to stop people crossing the English Channel in small boats. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, here arriving at the G20 meeting in Bali, said he was confident the crossings could be brought down. However, he warned there was no single thing that could fix the situation, promising even greater cooperation with France in the months ahead. The government is coming under increasing pressure to reduce journeys across the Channel, which have risen to record levels this year.
Look, I'm confident that we can get the numbers down, but I also want to be honest with people that it isn't a single thing that will magically solve this. We can't do it overnight, but people should be absolutely reassured that this is a top priority for me. I'm gripping it, and as I've said, in the time that I've been Prime Minister, you're already starting to see some progress with this deal with the French, but that's just a start. There's lots more that we need to do.
And finally, Britain's King Charles has celebrated his 74th birthday, with the occasion marked by him replacing his late father as the Ranger of Great Windsor Park. A new photo taken last week shows King Charles III leaning on an ancient oak tree in the park as he takes on a role once held by Prince Philip. Charles, who became the oldest monarch in British history when he succeeded his mother on the throne in September, is expected to enjoy his first birthday as king in private, with no public engagements planned. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Many thanks, Simon. Welcome to Sports News. Ahead of Thursday's international friendly against Portugal in Lisbon, head coach of the Super Eagles, Jose Peseiro, has called up Chidozie Awaziem to replace injured Olisanda, while Cyril Dessers will now replace, or will not be replaced, or will replace injured Victor Osimhen, beg your pardon. The scheduled friendly will be played at the Estadio José Alvalade on November the 17th in Lisbon, and the game will be Portugal's final matchup before they travel to Qatar for the FIFA World Cup. Senegal's Teranga Lions are the first African team to arrive in Qatar in the early hours of today, which shall see duo goalkeeper Edward Mendy and defender Kalidou Koulibaly joined other members of the 26-man squad as they arrived with 6 days to the FIFA World Cup. Injured striker Sadio Mane will undergo further medical checks in Munich in a week to monitor his recovery from an injury that could rule him out of the entire World Cup tournament. Brazil's football team players held their first training session at their pre-World Cup base in Turin earlier today ahead of the FIFA World Cup. The squad gathered at Juventus training facility in Italy, where Brazil will hold a 5-day training camp before flying to Doha on November the 19th. Tite's team opened their World Cup campaign against Serbia on November the 24th. And that's Sports News.
Well, thanks, Ayatunde. And the main news again. The Federal High Court in Abuja today adjourned indefinitely the trial of the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, as the defendant refused to appear in court. Also today, the Court of Appeal in Abuja disqualified Senator Godswill Akpabio as the APC's senatorial candidate for Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District in the 2023 general elections. Meanwhile, the Federal High Court in Uyo also sacked the Akwa Ibom APC governorship candidate, Akana Dofia, just as it ordered fresh primaries within 14 days. And the potential of tourism sector in driving national development came into focus today as the United Nations World Tourism Organization Global Conference kicked off in Lagos. And that's the news at 10 for tonight, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Kayode Okikolu. Good night.